I'm Margaret Liston, and Judy Talley and I are sponsoring Karin Schminke for this gallery talk this afternoon. Thank you all for coming. Karin is, I'm going to read my notes, is a leader in exploring the integration of digital technology and art. She uses natural forms for her inspirations and her imagery. And then she uses technical ways for her really original art. It's really interesting to see what she takes and what she makes. She's shown internationally, nationally and internationally. She has a gallery in Denver, and has shown lots locally in Bainbridge and the East Side, lots of different shows. She's also taught professor at the University of Wisconsin, California State, and Laguna College of Art and Design. And so here's Karin.
Thank you, Margaret. Can anyone hear that okay? Okay. No, okay. Let me see if I can pull this further, maybe. Or is that working better? Okay. If it falls again, just yell out. Okay, thank you. So starting at the beginning, I was born in the Midwest and grew up on a farm in Iowa. And I bring this up because this natal landscape really has affected my work and is integrated into it really strongly throughout my whole life. Not only, the connection you get just growing up on a farm to the seasons and all things natural, and you're constantly aware of the season, you know exactly where we are in the harvest cycle, even when you live in Seattle, in the city. But visually, the lush patterns just have really always been a part of what I've been interested in my art. Repetition of form, patterns that repeat from different times of the year, different ways, but they're variation constantly, but they're still patterning. I just find that really interesting. Multiple viewpoints of the same thing is really interesting, but probably most importantly is geometry. Geometry has played a very important part in my work, and I credit that looking back, not at the time when I started using it, but looking back I realized that the integration of geometric form and natural forms was just everywhere around me. I went to the University of Iowa and really discovered art there. Not much opportunities to do art as a child on a farm. But I fell in love, and I liked drawing, and I liked photography. But I became a design major, and I think the design field fit the way I approached creativity, in that it was methodical and had a process. And my professor or mentor really liked to work on creative thinking and expanding how you approach problem solving and those sorts of things. And that really stuck with me. So the first materials that I really worked with that I loved was the handmade paper. And it's got a really strong organic quality that I just loved. And of course, you see me putting geometric forms into it. But I was making the pieces on the you use a screen to make the paper. I don't know if you've ever seen paper making, but you have the pulp and it ends up on the screen either by scooping it or dumping it. And I would use that time to create the sheets so that when it dried, it was done. I never worked on top of the sheets. So you can tell that I would have been designing these ahead of time. There wasn't working intuitive, like putting a string down and deciding what's next. I had a sketch for everything. This was a piece that was about 40 by 30 inches, and it's modular. Again, my design background coming through, made each of the pieces independently on my screen so I could build up to a big form. And I brought in this drawing because I thought it was sort of interesting to see that on the left there, to show you the sketches. I had actually looked this week for sketches. I have old sketchbooks, and I found it. This piece would have been from like the probably around 1980s, give or take. And I still have the sketchbook, but I had like 3 or 4 pages of sketches for this single piece, and I just brought you the one that had color on it. another small piece I did at the time. But I was still drawing and I was still doing photography, but I was so attracted to the tactile nature of the paper that that photography just, the final result left me cold. I loved taking the photos, I loved looking at my negatives even, but I didn't really like the prints on paper. And I had, when I got my MFA from the University of Iowa in design, I also had taken a class in computers for the fine arts. And in the late 1970s, that was programming. There were no personal computers. And when I went to the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire to teach, they were very supportive of my interest in that. And shortly, within a few years, I'd gone to a lot of conferences and did other things. I got a computer in my studio that I could use. And you can see several things right off the bat. Very low res. This image would have been the width of an inkjet printer, so like 8.5 inches high. And then I had a printer that would allow me to send through a long sheet of paper, and I was printing on rice paper. So I was starting to begin to get some of that tactile quality that I like so much, and I was kind of doing semi-photographs, but it wasn't really a photograph because it was a video camera, and the video camera took a grab of a frame out of it, so it's just a still, and it was black and white, and then I could manipulate it in color on this Amiga computer, but the Amiga computer only worked in about, I don't know, 16 colors, and to prepare to get more colors, they called it, they dithered the colors together. So you can see on the top right and left sides there, if you're sitting close enough, you might be able to see, but there's like lines and dots, and they're placed together in different patterns, and in that way they got different kinds of purples and lavenders and things. But they're really just red and blue is all the colors that are really there. And the color of the paper, of course, mixing through. So it was very limiting, and this slide represents the other problem with it. And I took this photo of this piece last week. I found it in the bottom of my drawer when I was getting ready for today. And all of or most of the blue and green ink has fled the scene. The inks were very fugitive, and traditionally red is the longest lasting. So there were all these problems, and for all that reason, I looked for other solutions. And a few years later, I learned about a printer called an iris printer, and it's a electrostatic printer that, I'll have a picture of it here, I'll show you that and then come back to this, that you wrap your paper around it and then the head moves back and forth. So it's kind of a klutzy design, but it was one of the first printers that did really beautiful photo quality prints, and you could print onto cotton rag papers, which for me was starting to get my dream together of having some nice output from photographs. And this was a show that I did of inkjet prints, but I wanted to point out that each of those prints, and those were photo collages, there was no mixed media on them, each of those cost let's say around 1992 or something like that, like somewhere between $200 and $300 just for the print. So it was very, very expensive to produce a show with these. And for somebody like me who wanted to think about putting paint on the top of the print, or collaging, or cutting apart, doing some interesting things to get a more rich surface. I was really interested in getting back to that handmade paper rich surface. I couldn't bring myself to touch these things. They were too precious. But about this time, a couple things happened. We were living in California, and my husband got a job here, so we moved in 1994 to Seattle. And there was also the Northridge earthquake that year, which was interesting because our house was in Northridge, or close to Northridge, so that was all exciting. But everything worked out, and we moved here. But before we moved, I went to a workshop in Boston at Massachusetts College of Art and Design. And it was called Beyond the Digital Print. And the idea was that they had this inkjet printer there, and it was in the printmaking studio, and we had all kinds of other media, and we printed out things on the iris and went at it with other media, and it was so exciting. And the workshop was really cheap because I imagine the Mass College must have underwritten it somewhat. The big expense was my flight to Boston and back, and it was cheaper than 2 prints on an iris printer. So it was really not a hard decision at all to make. But when I met this group of people that were there, we started showing our work different places. Like that last slide was from a show I did with them. We did an art expo. We were trying to show our digital work and see how it was received. But we met a lot of people that were doing products for digital printers, like papers that would work. But we found that there was a whole another kind of printer out there that wasn't being used by art at all. And these are a little bit later done. These are ones I happen to have in my studio down the line. But at that point, they were a little bit smaller than this. But these are large format inkjet printers. And they started out, the early ones I had were like 36 inches wide. And we would approach these companies because they were creating prints for business, architectural rendering, things like that. But they hadn't, the producers and no one had really conceived of artists using them. And we said, let us work with your printers, and we think we can find a whole other market for you. And so in exchange for access to these printers in our studios, some of them were loans, some of them were long-term loans, some were short. We did about 6 years of a crazy carousel of get a printer, make some work that shows it off, do presentations. These were conferences that Seabold, which was a publishing conference, would give us a great big booth. We'd hang new art. We'd spend all day giving presentations for like 3 or 4 days in a row, and then we would pack up and go home and start it all over again with try to make different work for the next round. And we wrote articles on it, and we had articles written about what we were doing. We gave workshops, and it was an exhausting time. But one of the most exciting things we did, and this was kind of early on, but when we'd first had our inkjet printers for a few years, is we did a 3-week workshop at the National Museum of American Art. Now it's called the Smithsonian American Art Museum. But we set up, as you can see kind of in the middle there, and the top, I guess, a bunch of small stations for visitors to come in, and nobody had done it. Take pictures and manipulate them and then output them. And it was really pretty fun. But we had our large formats there. We had like 30 sponsors from the industry for this event, and we got an award that we were nominated for by Epson and Adobe. It was a really exciting, and it really raised our profile and made our efforts to get our hands on more equipment a little bit easier. But I wanted to show you what kind of work I was doing at the time. This is a pretty big printer, and each of these pieces has some small ones and some large ones. The one that I'm going to focus on is that bottom right one, and it's big enough to set on a piece of Reeves BFK paper. And what I did is you print on it. Well, we discovered by accident that there's a certain film you could print on with these printers, and if you set it on something wet, it goes over to the part that's wet. And so we wet rag paper, BFK paper, rolled it down, let it sit for a few minutes, and the whole thing would peel off and transfer to rag paper. And now that was really exciting because the printers were kind of low resolution, and doing the transfer kind of helped break up the sense of the dots and smooth it out. But even more fun for me is now I had a surface that I could work on with other media. There's the surface. And you can see on the left side, I've painted it with some either a pearl or a blue iridescent. I'm not sure looking back on it. And for me, of course, putting down rice paper was one of the first things I think about. And then this, after it was dried, I set it on another sheet of paper that was a little bigger and taped the edges down and put it through the printer another time to get what we call the sandwich print. So you'd have layers of stuff going on. So it did a bunch of things. It got rid of the problem of the low resolution print completely because there were so many layers of things happening. And it allowed me to get my love of tactile things put in there along with the acrylic paints, which were really fun for reflection, which is something I became fond of. And so these are some works from that series. And this one had kind of a gold paint underneath the branches. And this last one has rag paper. And they had drawings, they had photography, they had paper. So I had met my goal that I'd started out that would be like 15 years earlier at this point. But when this, during this time, we started writing a book, which we finished. I'll show you more about that later. But I also started working on metal. And this is the same similar processes that I was using for the first slides I just showed you. But this one was done on metal. And I have a video here that I made, again, this would have been because of something I used, I needed to pay back a company, and so I made him a video to show something I did. And anyway, but it also talks about how I worked and how I created this and what my thoughts were about it. So I'll let this play.
Inspired by the ornamental cherry tree that grows in my yard, I created a piece about anticipation. I was very drawn to the geometric simplicity of the budding cherry branches in early spring. This became the starting point for a drawing that further abstracted and simplified those forms. The sketch was finished and split into 2 equal parts to begin the development of the diptych. These drawings were scanned and reassembled in Photoshop. As I like to have layers of textures in my work, another pair of the abstract tree images were drawn with ink on paper. In Photoshop, you see these 2 images combined for the left half of the diptych. At that time, I also began to develop the composition and colors for the piece. With a basic composition set, I created a composite image of the composition to print on the 2 30 by 40 inch aluminum panels. This print was done to position mixed media elements onto the panels, allowing for the proper realignment during the final inkjet overprint. As the substrate slowly developed, I simultaneously continued to work on the digital image in Photoshop. Here are just a few overprints I considered before choosing the final one. To help make a final decision, I overlaid the chosen print files over a photo of the painted substrate. By varying transparency, I get a preview of the finished piece. The final piece is called Once in a Blue Moon and captures the magic, longing, and anticipation of an early spring evening.
So I added this slide to the end here. This was the piece hanging at Bainbridge Arts and Crafts behind their checkout area. And I wanted you to see why I'm attracted to metal. You can see how it just sort of glows in there and interacts with the lights in the room. And I started using metal probably in the late 1990s, and I still use it to this day. And it kind of surprises me because, you know, I'm all about nature and it didn't, and handmade paper, and metal seemed really alien to me, but I had to do it for one of the projects I was doing with, we called ourselves the Digital Atelier. One of the projects we were doing, I thought, oh, okay, and I got it back and I just loved it. So I've been using metal ever since, and now you can kind of see there how the light is different, the colors are different in different places, depending on what the light in the room, or if you're passing by, you affect the light, so it makes it kind of an interactive thing. Here's one more piece. Similar, it's kind of a fun one because I actually, this is 2 panels of metal, and I put rusted, there was a way to put down metal and then rust it, and I put that at the, it's on the bottom here coming through the printer, and then the top is metal, aluminum, the gray area is actually shiny metal left, and then I have black paint and rusted paint, and the middle is a texture that I painted. And this is halfway through the printing. So you can kind of get a sense of, see the white around the edges is the carrier sheet, that, and then I'm printing, when I'm printing over the edges on the metal just like I did with the paper. And there's that final piece. So the work at the, with all of these companies and with the places that we'd gone, like the National Museum of American Art, led to some interesting invitations. I just wanted to mention a couple. Herman Miller, the furniture company, we were invited to be artists in residence there for a couple of weeks, and we created images for what they called their Dilbert cubes. They even called them that at Herman Miller. And they said, we need to decorate the Dilbert cubes, so what can you do? So anyway, we did that. This was a really interesting one, too. We were invited to go to Littleton printmaking studios in North Carolina. Harvey Littleton being the father of modern craft glass blowing and the teacher of the likes of Dale Chihuly and just about everybody else from that generation. But he quit blowing glass kind of early and developed this technique where he used glass to make glass plates. He calls it lithography. And we were invited, he was a very forward-thinking guy, he invited us to bring an inkjet printer, you can see in the center photo there, into his studio, and we combined inkjet transfers that I just showed you with vitrograph plates. And it was really interesting and exciting project. And and all of it was reported then in the book, and we created the book it felt like a thesis. You know, we'd done all this work and done all this research, and we just put it all out there and shared it all and gave credit. And then it's like, okay, that's done. Now I can really think about art and not think about the next trade show and the next thing. So it felt like a graduation. But one last opportunity came, and this is one of the game changers for me. And we were invited to go to look at lasers, and the company is called Universal Laser System, and they're in Scottsdale, Arizona. And this is me looking at my first laser cut, but and I can't remember his name, but the gentleman in the back of this picture here worked at one of the inkjet printer companies formerly, and he went there and he knew us, and he said, come and work on this laser and see what you think. And here I am showing the president of the company some of the work that I did, and he liked what we did, we liked what he did, and we worked with them, and I'm still working with their laser. But the first things I did were these kinds of forms, and I did have a background in three-dimensional design as well as two-dimensional, and so I really started making these three-dimensional forms right away. But these are only really like a foot tall, and you can see by the way I photographed them, I really want them to be gigantic, but to create them, they probably have to be out of metal to be outside, would have been really too expensive for me. So instead I started making pieces that are just screens that sit on a wall and stand out from the wall with standoffs, and then the light shines on the wall behind it. It becomes part of the piece as well. This one was both wood and powder-coated metal, the powder-coat metal being on the right. This is an example of a commission I did for a couple in Bellevue. This is hanging in their stairwell. This is another one of those pieces with both different kinds of media together. This is the show that those were in. I had quite a few shows with it, but the most successful use of this technology was commissions of architectural type. This is a installation called One Light and Two Shadows, and it's in Capitol Hill in a apartment complex. It was new when this was done that had like 5 stories, and the person who was developing it had art in mind, and he commissioned an artist to do something on each floor, and this was my floor, and this is what I did. And there was kind of an L-shaped hallway, and in the middle of the L was pretty dark, and so I put the light piece there, and it's half-inch wood with a backlit screen and light LED behind it. And then at the end of the hallways, I did more of my traditional screen with shadows, so a light with 2 shadows. This is another one I did. This is my house. This is my front yard. We had a weird spot there that used to have windows, and we got rid of it because we needed storage, so it became a notch. And at some point, I said, I got to put something in that notch, and that was what I did. But I went from that to creating, kind of at the same time I was doing this. The screens were fun, and they had their place, but I was still working on metal and paper and later wood, and I was integrating the laser cut images here too, and this piece is called Beyond the Blue, and I have yet another little video to talk about this, and you can see how I did integrate the laser into this type of work.
This photo I took of a pattern on water became the inspiration for creating a piece which I called Beyond the Blue. First, the photo was developed into a black and white image. One version of the image was colorized and printed on aluminum in a large format printer. A second version of the image was developed as a vector line image. This vector version was sent to my laser to cut the image out of rice paper. Here you see the 4 laser-cut rice paper sheets ready to be aligned and then attached to the pre-printed metal. After the attached papers were allowed to dry, acrylic gels were applied in selected areas, adding texture and depth to the image. Both inkjet pigment ink and acrylic paints were applied to the surface to get the desired look. Many tests were done to develop the top panels. Inkjet print ink, acrylics, and laser cut and printed paper were all used on this section. The computer plays a unique role in enabling both old and new media to work seamlessly together in creating this piece, Beyond the Blue. It represents a perfect merging of new media with traditional techniques.
So I always say the computer is a mega tool. I said it probably better in this video, but it is an umbrella tool that you can bring everything in one way or another. You know, I can do a painting and then I can photograph it, and then, as you've seen in these videos, and then decide what I'm going to do next, or maybe even think about what colors I want to use next with it. So it's a very powerful tool for both creation and ideation, but it also allows me to put all these different media together. So this series is called Beyond the Blue, and some other ones I'm going to show you here, from a series I called Open Space, for kind of obvious reasons. All have a deep horizon line to them, and they all use the laser and cut paper and a lot of paint on mostly metal. But the cut paper is an interesting thing. When you lay it on top of metal, it becomes like a screen that holds back the reflective qualities that I've discussed loving, and then it forms it into the small areas that are left. So if I hole cut in it, you'll see just that part will look shiny. So it's a way to shape and sculpt the pieces. This piece was one of the early ones I did, and I just point out, because the sky, I actually painted acrylic paint on the metal and then etched it off. You can both cut and etch. Etching is the process of having the laser go across like it would with an inkjet printer, but try to remove what's there depending on the strength. So it's actually etching into the and revealing the metal. But my studio's in my home, and I soon realized etching acrylic paint is like burning acrylic paint, and you really, really don't want to be doing that in your home. So this was one of the last ones I did that, and I went to cutting, and I found other ways to etch, or other paints to etch that I could etch. So there was quite a few in the series. This one my gallery in Denver hated because it was too dark, and yet it's one of my favorite, because for me it's called Lingering Light, and it's about the last light of the day and how it holds the reflections. This is a real ode to Iowa here, but some of them were quite abstract, and I kind of liked the way, I love abstraction, and I liked the way that this one sort of became. If I hadn't shown you the other ones before, it's an abstract piece, but if you see it in context, then you can read it as a landscape. But I really wanted to see how far I could push it, and this was the result of that. Water inspired this one, obviously. But this photo I had to throw in. I love living in the Pacific Northwest, and I love the vistas. But you can see what I'm photographing. It's the textures, it's the grasses. That's pretty typical. I'd come home, my husband would have photos like this as he took this, and I would have, here's a grass, and here's a bark of a tree that I liked, and I might have one picture of the mountains, but it would never get even saved probably. So I'm always gathering ideas and inspiration on my outings into the mountains and ocean and everything around here. This is the piece that I think you used on the poster, I believe. Yes, Aspirations. And these were, each of the squares in this piece are about 4 inches, if I recall right. And they were done a kind of a new way for me, and that is that I took plywood and I painted a coat of either white down first and then black on top of that, or vice versa. I did white first with black on top. And then, say that backwards, black first and white on top, one or the other. And then that's what you see is black and white. And where you see the color that's kind of a tan color, that's the wood that's etched down through. So let me just show you a file here so you can see. Oh, that's the one up close. So you can see where it's etched down to the wood. And the black circular areas in the center area, those are actually holes cut through the wood. So when it's put on its frame, it reads as a deep, deep black. And then the lighter black is where I've etched through the white a bit. And here's another one in that series. The piece on the far right center there, I'm going to show you. This is the development of it, so you can kind of get a sense. The top image here on the left are the holes that I drew, and I aligned them with lines that would become the stems. And then that lower image was manipulated to become the image in the center. So these two, the top left and the middle one, became the two things that I sent to my laser. The top one to cut holes, and the other one to etch through the paint. In this case, it was wood with white paint and black on top. And so it's, again, hard to see in the photo the difference between the black painting and the black holes, but in person, once they're mounted, it's very interesting. I have at least one example to show you up here if you want to see it up close later. This is a piece I did that I showed actually with Judy and Margaret in our, you maybe don't know this, but we are part of an artist group that has started meeting. I should say that when I first moved to Seattle and I'd met these artists from all over the country that I was working on these projects with, after a year I realized I didn't know a single artist in the city after a year. And so I went out and I joined the Seattle Print Arts group, and soon after that they formed these salons that they encourage artists to meet on a regular basis once a month. And that would have been in the late 90s, and we've been meeting ever since. So that's how I know these two wonderful women. This piece is actually one of my favorites of this series. It was done as a juried show called Tectonic Shift, and it was in the Denver Civic Center building called McNichols. It's shown on the right there at Bainbridge. I just showed it there last winter. But it's about the rhythm of life, growth, new growth on the top, and you can't see it very well in the photos, but the bottom has the dried stalks of flowers that are gone. So it's sort of the continual renewal, and then the light sort of kind of the force, that maybe the green fuse that drives the flower, like Dylan Thomas says. It's the force of energy that keeps it all going. This piece, Canopy, also, I have a study for that up here that has like studies with different varnishes and things, but again, the black branch parts are holes cut through the wood, and everything else is etched and painted. This is another way that I hung it, and it's called, I'm going to go back here. It's called Canopy because it's inspired by a tree overhead, obviously. But I found that I actually liked it this way as well. It isn't so much a canopy, but it has a certain dynamic tension. It's more like a tree in the wind or something, where the parts are really swirling around a lot. This shows you kind of a nice close-up so you can get a sense of what the surfaces are like when they're etched and cut and painted. And these are some of the files that I used to make that last piece. So this is, my organizing software is called Lightroom, and it can look at my computer and pull everything in an organized way. So I just I was looking for photos of this piece, and this came up. And it's like, oh, well, take a screenshot to show you guys what it looks like in process. Work that's done similarly, technically, was this garden journal, and both last piece and this piece were drawings I did at my garden, and I love being able to finally be able to draw and output it as something that is more than a drawing, and I think it captures really well the feelings of the approaches that I have. I have two different images of it here because it's the same work, but the lighting or something, different galleries, they look so different. Here you get a sense of the graphic quality of them, and here you get a sense of the etched richness of them. So between the two, you can kind of start to recreate it in your mind. I'll show you a few examples here. I did both etching and cutting, but the cutting this time I didn't cut through. So you see the darkest lines, like in the top right corner is a real obvious one, where I cut but not all the way through. So it just makes a really crisp, dark line on the final piece. This is a sweet pea, a peony bloom, a begonia, clematis, and another peony. And then another, I have to show you just one more project. I got invited to do that. I thought was interesting. I have something like it to show you up here if you want to see the real thing. But working on a printer that prints both white, color images, this normally, but also prints white ink and spot varnish. And I didn't have access to it ahead of time, so I created a whole bunch of images that I could play with while I was there. This was sort of the getting ready stuff. I did square images and circular images. I did linear things. I did parts that were more soft and textural. And then I created these colored composites from those in Photoshop before I went, and cut out the wood ahead of time with holes and some of them instances, rectilinear shapes, depending on which piece I was working on, that I then lined up the image that I printed on it on this printer. And here you can see now the second print going on, and you can, if you look carefully behind in the white area, you can see the holes in the wood there as well, and how they fit or match the white shapes that I'd drawn. So it was an interesting project, and I printed about 18, I think, pieces. Down in the very bottom here, you can see the varnish is the white reflection next to the black holes that I had cut before I came. It's kind of hard to get that in all the photographs, but all of them have elements like that. Here with the light shining, you can see, again, varnish and holes in the bottom left. So when I got them home, I created 2 pieces of them. This is inflorescence 1 and inflorescence 2. Each of these 5 pieces are 1 by 2 feet. And then I did a series for an exhibition called Matter of Time, and I called my work Concurrent Views because I was thinking about looking at natural forms, concurrent views of the same thing at different times, and again, that theme that I like of splitting things up, the geometry of it all, and integrating time. And I also have a little video on creating these pieces that I'll show you. These are from just maybe about 5 years ago.
My ideas usually come from direct experience of the natural world. Drives and hikes into the local countryside and beyond prove to be a very rich source. But during this last year of isolation, I've had more time than ever to connect to the garden that surrounds my studio. I'm drawn to the rich array of patterns and forms of the intermingled flower and vegetable gardens, but I especially enjoy watching the changes over time. My art captures time slipping backward and forward to celebrate all phases of life. Photos, drawings, and prints all become starting points for my abstracted compositions. My art is produced using a wide array of digital tools and traditional artist media. Here, a photo is transformed into an acrylic painting over etched wood. Water is crucial to the garden and often finds its way into my art. This drawing, inspired by the sound of water, was laser cut out of paper. The cut paper, being removed from the laser bed here, was attached to a painted aluminum panel. The use of aluminum is widespread in my work as I love the way it captures and reflects ambient light mimicking nature. The multiple panels found in each work are used to suggest shifts in time and place while drawing parallels and contrasts between forms. Each piece in this exhibit begins with studies in a variety of media, such as these prints made directly from plants that I harvested in my garden. My goal in the final work is to elevate the source materials to iconic presentations of nature that can bring forth feelings of sustenance and comfort.
So here's a few more pieces, but then we're kind of run out of time. I want to make sure to get to my later work. These are all wood. I've sort of talked about the techniques already, but wood and paper on metal, etched and painted wood, or cut. All of them have etched or cut paper or wood in them. And that's the one from the video. Oh, and then, let me go, I should have gone back to that. So that was, I kind of mentioned in there that was the COVID had hit, and I was home and looking at the garden for inspiration. And after I had that show, I was kind of, my attention just pivoted to survival. And I planted a whole bunch more vegetables, and I started cooking and making sourdough and all that kind of stuff. In the studio, I'd go in there and I'd work for like 5 minutes. They go, oh, I got to go do something else. So I wasn't very productive. Some artists were great. They really loved the lack of distraction, but I was more distracted than ever. So when I came back, this is the first work I did, is this series, and they are, I guess I don't have it here. They are all based on circular forms, and I talk about this in yet another video here, so let's see if this one will work.
My work is often inspired by hiking and traveling, but in these last COVID years, I've found both solace and inspiration from our garden. Many plants in the early stages of growth form beautiful round shapes. To a gardener, this neat and orderly stage promises wonderful things to come. I chose this radio shape to create work that captured my longing for all that is hopeful. The first step was to develop images that exaggerate clean, organic, radial symmetry. These images were created through a combination of drawing, photo manipulation, and finally extensive editing in Illustrator to arrive at an image that captured the correct balance of organic and simple geometric form that could be cut on my laser. After cutting, the paper forms were assembled, painted, and then attached to a heavy watercolor paper. In order to give these images the feeling of life suspended or frozen in place, I began to cover the image in mostly white paint in order to encapsulate and obscure the forms below. At the same time, close inspection reveals hidden colors and a persistent physicality of form, signs of new life. To the bottom of each radial square, I added a reflective pool which represents a source of energy. An abstracted laser-cut paper form floats in this reservoir on a painted metal bed. The use of reflective metal here gives these panels a liquid quality to contrast with the chalky, frozen radial forms above. After completing these pieces, I wanted to do work that represents recovery. I created a pair of pieces, Glimmer and Shimmer, which grew out of this sketch, where tension is created by dividing the flowing organic forms into geometric segments. I chose metal again for the substrate due to its ability to capture ambient light. But this time, the cut paper was painted with interference acrylic paint, which contains mica flakes that offer a unique flip between two complementary colors. This creates lively movement in the work as the viewer moves in front of it. I want to thank Bobby Walker and the great team at Walker Fine Art for inviting me to exhibit this work in the Peripheral Contemplations exhibit.
So a couple things I wanted to say. One thing that's new in this work for me is that I no longer, I quit using the printer to print on them, and I started using acrylic pouring paints, and found like for like 5 years all I used the printer for was to put down color on metal. And then I had this inkjet ink on the metal, and I could do nice things like gradients and things like that. But I had to use pretty toxic varnish on them to make them stable. And with the acrylic pours, it was a really friendlier process, and I just enjoyed it a lot. So I'm not sure if I'm ever going to use my large format printers again, and it's sort of a weird thing. I can't quite let them go out of my studio yet, but I haven't used it now for many, many years. The other thing I would want to talk about is sort of the segue to the next work. Well, first of all, let me just say, like these top parts, I painted over them till they were almost gone, and that was really how I was feeling about life with COVID. You know, just like it's a beautiful thing, and then it's hidden. You know, and so, but if you got to see the actual piece, I wanted to show you at least one of the tops close up. You could sense it was all still there. You can't so much in the photos from a distance, but I wanted to show you this close-up of that. So And the bottom, again, is a reflective metal, and so it also has sort of a more positive, colorful feeling to it than just the white tops. But after this work was done, I had a show. I had 3 shows in 2 years, and that ended in January. And I was pretty exhausted, and I thought I'd give myself a couple months off, and I started cleaning. I never got done, but I cleaned a lot of my studio storage, trying to make space for things. And then I started to get back to work slowly. And what I did, which I've never really done before, is I always sketch things, but I started sketching on my iPad, which I have a nice iPad with a pen that really is fun to work with. I have a software called Procreate. And the nice thing is it's portable. You know, you can sit anywhere, watch TV, you can sketch, and you can do watercolor, and it's not a mess. You know, it's just great. And so I started doing these pieces. They're still radial symmetry, and I was planning on producing them as large pieces cut out of wood, like you saw in the pieces leading up to this, particularly like the show before, where I was etching and cutting and then painting and all of those types of things. And I picked out one that had 3 pieces, and I was going to start on it, and I thought, this is my first piece in 6 months, and it's going to take me 6 months to finish. And I thought, you know, and the other thing is I'm working on this iPad, and I don't know how things will scale, because my iPad screen's about this big, and so scaling something up to that big, I wasn't sure. I thought I needed an intermediate step. I need to do some studies. So I pulled out watercolor, and I started doing watercolor, and I found that I really like that. So for the first time in my life, I'm creating work on watercolor. But I wanted to show you one more thing here before I show you the watercolors that I've started, and that's this second piece called flower number 2. I'm calling them flowers. They're round. I don't know. They might also be mandalas. They might be. I'm not sure yet what they'll be in the end. But this is sketching in Procreate, and it's going to go very, very fast, because Procreate grabs everything you do and then can play it back to you as a video. So that's what you're going to see here, is everything I did on this image to get to the final. And a lot of this is dead ends, things I just threw out, try throughout. At some point here, the actual painting comes in that I did part of it, and I calculate then what the rest of it's going to look like as best as I can. And that was my final sketch. Now, you know, I said I am a designer, and I will say that as an artist, however, I have a plan, and then the real challenge or goal is to be aware of what I'm doing as I'm making it, and then be an artist and respond. So what I made doesn't look exactly like that. I'll hold it up here, and maybe Margaret could take it to. Maybe we should have some lights, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. Then you can show, there's 2 more in the series. This is as far as I've gotten. I guess I could go back with this, and you can, let me go back there. You can see these are the 2 that Judy and Margaret are showing are the next 2 on the, so I have number 1, 2, and 3 on the top row done. That's as far as I've gotten as of yesterday. So that's what I'm working on right now. These are watercolor. The only thing there's also some graphite from I drew on them. The only thing that's a little bit high tech is that I watercolored on rice paper and then cut those out with the laser. These textures you're seeing here are actually cut out. So I didn't want to give up completely on the physicality part that I like, and so you really sense even though it's just rice paper, you really sense that physicality of those cut paper pieces. This must be the right time to quit, because my headset wants to fall out. Are there any questions? We've got a few minutes left. And up here, yes?
What part of Iowa?
What part of Iowa?
I think I recognized the field.
Eastern Iowa. I grew up between, well, it depends on where you are in Iowa. I have different answers, but I grew up between Cedar Rapids and Waterloo on a farm. Yeah. You're from Dubuque, okay. Yeah, Vinton, I'm south of Vinton, went to school somewhere else. But I have up here things you can come up and look up close. This is a piece, there's a triptych here that is metal, that I attached rice paper with a methyl cellulose so I could actually put it on the laser and cut it without killing us. And then I put a varnish on it when I was done. And the bottom part here is a deeply etched wood that I painted on top of, and you can see these up here.
That piece you picked up, it looks like a porcupine.
Looks like a porcupine. These are, and I'm trying to remember the teasel, is it called? It's a teasel, I think. It's a dried teasel seed head from the fall. And I have a whole, like, 30 of images I took of the teasel, and that's 3. Yes.
I'm trying to figure out how you do that. I'm trying to figure out what the tools are that you use. I mean, you've explained the printers.
Oh, the laser.
But the it's hard for me to get.
Yeah.
From
Well, let me
there to
talk. This
there.
is a good a piece to talk about the laser, because it has two things it can do. It can cut out, like here. Let me put one of these up again. This shows it pretty well. So let's say I painted paper green, and then it can cut out this pattern for me and these little holes. It can cut it out. It has a little, it's like a laser cutting blade. It's not a blade, doesn't touch it. It's a little piece of fire. It cuts through it cuts through the paper. So that's the cutting thing. And in the one movie, you could.
Is it like a stylus?
No, it's a light. It's a light. Like a laser light. Yeah. Like they use it laser surgery on your eyes. It's the same. Yeah, cataracts. Yeah. And then the other thing you can do is it can etch, and it looks completely different when it cuts. It just goes wherever those lines that I send it to. It can just go all over But when I'm doing etching, it actually is like a inkjet printer. It goes back and forth, and if it's something that needs to cut deep in, I'll send a black dot. If I don't want to cut it all, I'll send a white. And if I want it to be in between, then I'll dither black and white. So it'll cut. So where it's black, it'll go really deep, and where it's white, it won't go at all. And then in between, it'll make kind of a soft texture. This would probably be a good image. Maybe you could show this around, Margaret. But this is one of those where I painted. Looks like a dark green on top of plywood, and then painted white on top of it. And then this is all etching. So I sent a drawing that looked a lot like this, and then I etched it went back, probably took it an hour to etch this, and goes back and forth. And do I program the printer? Only in the sense that I create the files, like the one image I showed where with the little pieces, and I showed the 3 different things. That one where it had the grayscale and the white and the black. That's what I'm going for, and I have to create that. It has to look just like that. Whenever I'm etching, it has to be black, white, or spotted black that looks like gray, and those are my choices. And so yeah, I create that. Some of it, like I start with a drawing, and then at some point I have to translate it into either that or something that can send to the laser to cut. So I'm working on my Mac, send it to my laser on my PC, and so they're small files, really. So.
What is
I'm wondering, here I am.
There you are. Okay. Thank you.
Your etching, with all the pieces you've shown today, it's 2 lifetimes, it looks like to me. How did you do the etching?
You mean technically? Yeah, maybe I should go back to this one image because we're getting more questions on that. I'm just going to zoom back while I talk, I guess.
Do you actually have a manual cutting tool?
Well, the laser is the cutting tool, and the one video where I was picking up the blue paper off of it, that's it. It's like the size of a dishwasher, and it has a glass lid to protect you. When you cut, it has to be encased to keep you safe, and it has a laser that the laser moves across anywhere on.
But how do you move that?
It's controlled by a computer. I send it the file, and then it has I should call it they call it a RIP on a printer, but it has a software that will take that, translate it to commands for the laser. And I don't know if that answers your question too, but let me just.
So it's not actually a handheld tool.
No, it's
remote.
not. No.
Yeah.
this is, it's not that much different than this, where it's actually moving back and forth across it. The handheld part is preparing the files. Let's see, it's back a little bit further, the one I wanted to show you. Right before this.
It's just exquisite.
A little bit. Sorry, you have to watch the whole thing again here. There, this is what I was trying to get to. So this file here is what I have to prepare to make something etch. This is what I have to, this is actually similar to what I make. Before I send this to the printer, I have to turn it into vector lines. I showed it in one of the videos, which are just little outlines that it can follow and cut. But for etching, where it goes back and forth like a printer on everything, it's working off of a file that looks like that. So it's two different functions. And you can do them, you can send them both at once, you can send them one at a time, whatever you want. Yeah.
Your artwork resembles block prints. Were you ever influenced by that, or did you ever utilize those in your preparations?
No, I did not. We were just talking before, I think Margaret and I, about how what I have here, if you look at these up front, they could become block prints. And I sometimes think, well, that might be interesting to explore, but I haven't. Instead, the block that I'm creating is actually the art. When I have the block done, that's the art. And sometimes I paint on it, but it's that physicality is what I like. And so to print it, then I have something flat again. So, I really do like the physicality of that block. Yes.
I enjoy the connection between Iowa and the patterns. When I was in childhood, my parents had a fine art book of color, and I always appreciated Grant Wood.
Oh, yeah.
And spring plowing, and I've never forgotten that, as well as American Gothic. We had American Gothic in our living room for a while, large print. People thought it was some of our parents or something, but anyway, that's my comment. I appreciate the Iowa connection to patterns.
The eastern Iowa is filled with rolling hills, but Grant Wood picked a particularly interesting area, Stone City, to work with really deep ravines. It's beautiful. Beautiful work, yeah.
I'd like to get people to see this one.
Yeah.
It's so amazing.
So this is one where the cutting, here's the trick. This is the first, actually the first series I did was these ones that were based on grasses in my yard, and I did 2 big series, which I showed you. This is an extra piece, but I brought it to show because the thing that you can't really see in the slides is that the black is actually cut. So now Margaret will hold it up so you can see through it. So they're actually holes, and when you, there, show the backside there. And before I frame them, they're not really all that successful. But once I frame them and put them on the wall, the frame makes a black shadowy space behind the black, and then I have the black holes. First time I hung that piece, actually, the show with Judy and Margaret, people were saying, "What ink did you use? That's so black." It's like, it's a hole, So I really enjoyed that. I have another, this was the other piece that one of the canopy piece. I have a little piece of that. If you can just pass that around if you wanted to see that. Yeah. You can pass that around. That's one of the canopy pieces, and it's got notes on the back side of things I was trying with it, like a varnish. Part of it's varnished and part of it isn't, but give you the sense of the black. Are you doing anything more with watercolor? Well, I'm going to do more with this. This is my latest work. The question was, am I doing more with watercolor? And this last work I showed you here, these 3 pieces, I have this whole, the sketches page I showed you with 12 sketches. I plan to do some more. I always plan to do 20 and then I'll do 10, but yeah, I plan to do more. There was another question. Who else?
I'm still trying to sort out your technique, or how you do it. So at any point, do you do a freehand sketch?
That's what this is.
Those are.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Like this, I knew I was going to go to the laser with it, so I did this. I think this sketch was probably first, and then I overlaid. You can see I have alignment marks on the corner, and then planned where the holes were going to go within it, but it was all done by hand. But I sometimes I've done sketches and then had to separate it, and I've done that too. But if I know I'm going to go to the laser and I know I'm going to do some cutting and some etching, they need to be two different files. So I just started right off doing that with this series. So. Do I ever use a wood cutting tool instead of the laser? No, I never did wood cutting before I had the laser, and so I would, yeah, but I don't. I like drawing, photography, those are my loves, so those are the things that I integrate with the laser, just like I was doing before with the printer. But I'm pretty much now into, most of my work is just laser and paint, and depending on what surface I'm working on. And, acrylics and now watercolor. The question is, where can you see my work besides Bainbridge? I was showing for many years with Patricia Cameron, but she closed her gallery in Sodo. So I haven't put any energy into finding another gallery. It's a whole thing. I have, the One Light and Two Shadows, if you can get to the second floor or third floor, you could see that. I have public art, but it's in like schools that are around the state. So I don't have anything local. Trying to think where else you might see it. Well, right now, if you went to Bainbridge Arts and Crafts, they don't have it up, but they have a lot in storage. They might, be nice enough to show you something.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
Are you saying that the computer controls the laser?
Yes.
So the drawing that we see is something you've done on the computer?
No, this is a drawing in a notebook.
No, the first one is a real drawing,
Yeah.
but then in the final work,
then this is the drawing, and then this I took into my computer and manipulated it to make this.
So that was done on the computer, instructing the
And then when that gets sent to the printer, it knows, yeah, it can create
That's pretty.
that etching from that. Yeah.
So it seems like you have an enormous facility in controlling this kind of line. I mean, it seems to me, if I were doing it, it'd be a huge mess. How did you learn how to do that kind of complex linear drawing on the computer, knowing how the laser would do it?
I did the drawing. You can see it's kind of ugly
Right.
globs and stuff on paper, and then I manipulated it on the computer, which is a
Okay.
slightly different thing than drawing it all over again. Although there are things I draw on the computer, I do that as well. But I enjoy more this process because I like working on paper. Although I have to say my iPad I've been enjoying quite a bit drawing on. That's kind of rare. Usually I do my initial sketches with, pen and paper or pencil and paper. But now I am starting to do more with the iPad, so it's already digital. But with me, it doesn't matter if it starts with photography or drawing or something, then it's going to go through the computer, sometimes back out to traditional media again. Like if I didn't like this, I might work on the computer, print it out, and then ink on it some more, go back into the computer again. Sometimes they make that path many times, depending on what I'm doing. This is simple and small, but on other projects, I've moved back and forth quite a bit. And then for the laser work, or a printer too, then it's like sending something to your desktop printer. You just send the file and it gets printed. So I send this file and it gets etched. I have a lot of control in terms of I can control the speed and the strength of the etching, and that controls how hard it etches through, and every material is different. So there's a lot of testing. But as far as actually manipulating it in the laser, once I press go the last time, I just stand back and watch.
How many additions do you make of each one till you get what you want?
The question was, how many additions do I make of each one till I get what I want? When I think addition, I think like something more technical, I don't really do it. I used to do multiple editions. We called them unique editions, and we made each one different, didn't work. But it was kind of confusing, and I decided I didn't really want to work the same images anymore. So now I just make one of a kind. But I might do. As I looked around my studio today to think what to bring, I thought, I could bring these piles of testing little things I do, because I've got tests on metal, I've got tests on plastic, I've got all these tests, like even the one that's going around that's from the Canopy series. You can see the top parts painted over with a varnish because I wanted to see what that would. I'm constantly testing, and so nothing goes to waste. If I start to cut something I don't like it, I save that piece of wood or whatever it is, and then it becomes a test piece. And so I'm always exploring, as all artists are. I mean, with watercolor, I'm testing colors there before I put them down. So it's no different than that, really. Yes. It's a good question. I used to get my wood at Midway Plywood up in, it was close, I live in Kenmore, it was close to me up in kind of on the Linwood border, I think, Highway 99. And he sold, so I still have quite a supply, and I'm going to have to find somebody new, but he was very, very helpful, yeah.
A microphone. I enjoy working with handmade papers and also rice paper and printing on them, Photoshop, Lightroom. And I didn't know that you could laser cut rice paper. I'm intrigued. Is there somewhere in Seattle that I can take a file and they'll cut it for me?
There are makers centers where you can go and do it. I think they probably give you some help. But there was one in Fremont, at least last time I looked, whether they're still there or not. I don't know if this is pre-COVID. But so there are places that have lasers. There's one at UW Bothell in there. I don't know if it's just open to students. But, there are places that have it. Now, service bureaus, there may be a service bureau as well, and that's what you'd want to search for.
I'm sorry, a what now?
Service bureaus.
Service bureau.
Yeah, like a service bureau could have an inkjet printer, and they could do inkjet prints. Other ones might have... I've used a service bureau to cut my great big screens, and those either were water jet service bureaus or...
so I want a service bureau that has
a laser. Yes.
And any of the lasers will cut the rice paper?
Any laser. So the laser can cut anything that will burn. And
okay, and you don't need the Kozo double paper to do the cutting on? No?
No.
Okay.
This paper that I used here, you can see even painted at these triangular areas here. How transparent that is. That's a very fine paper.
Yeah,
I just turned down my. I just turned down the power. Just have to test it. Otherwise, you can burn it up right there. You have to watch if you have it up too high.
Okay, great. I'll find a service bureau.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, you'd enjoy it. Yeah. Or find a maker's place and have them help you. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much for your attention.